Jake Morrison had never felt so small in his entire life as he did standing in the main hall of the Galactic Council station, watching hundreds of alien species file into the grand chamber in perfect silence. His hands were sweating inside his formal diplomatic gloves, and he kept checking his datapad even though he had memorized every protocol rule Ambassador Claire Hampton had drilled into him over the past 3 months. "Stop fidgeting," Claire whispered beside him without moving her lips, her eyes fixed straight ahead like every other diplomat in the massive room. Jake forced his hands to his sides and tried to copy her perfect posture, but his heart was racing so fast he could hear it pounding in his ears. This was humanity's first audience with Queen Velthara, the supreme ruler of the Krithian Empire. And Jake was terrified he would mess it up somehow. The Krithian Empire controlled over 40% of the known galaxy and had never lost a single war in their 3,000-year history. Meeting their queen was considered the highest honor any species could receive, and Jake was just a junior diplomat who had only been off Earth twice before this mission. Commander Ben Torres stood behind them with the security detail, his face calm but his hand resting near his sidearm in a way that told Jake even their head of security was nervous. The chamber itself was breathtaking, with walls that seemed to stretch up forever and a ceiling that showed the stars beyond the station in perfect clarity. There were no chairs because most species present did not sit the same way humans did. So everyone stood in precise formations according to their rank and importance. Humanity's spot was near the back, which made sense since they were one of the newest species to join the galactic community and had very little influence compared to the ancient civilizations that filled the front rows. "Remember the rules." Claire breathed quietly. "Absolute silence unless she addresses you directly. Bow exactly 45 degrees when she enters. Never make eye contact unless she commands it. And for the love of everything sacred, do not interrupt her for any reason." Jake nodded once, very carefully, and went back to reviewing the cultural files on his datapad. The Krithians were an old race, older than almost any other in the galaxy, and their queen had ruled for over 600 years. She was known for her brilliant military strategy, her ruthless efficiency, and her complete intolerance for disrespect or protocol violations. There were stories about diplomats who had offended her being banned from Krithian space forever, taking their entire species trade agreements down with them. Jake swallowed hard and wondered again why Claire had insisted he come along to such an important meeting when he was so inexperienced. "You need to see how these things work," she had told him back on the transport ship. "And besides, you have good instincts about people, even if you lack experience." Right now his instincts were telling him to ruin. A deep sound like a massive bell being struck echoed through the chamber, and every being present immediately straightened to perfect attention. Jake copied them quickly, his pulse jumping even higher. The main doors at the front of the hall began to open, sliding apart with complete silence despite their enormous size. Fog or smoke or something like it rolled out from the opening, catching the light from the stars above and creating an effect that was both beautiful and intimidating. Then she appeared. Queen Velthara was enormous, easily twice the height of any human, with 4 arms and a body that seemed to be covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. She had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face, and when she looked across the assembled delegates, Jake felt like she could see right through into his very soul. She wore robes that looked like they were made of liquid starlight and a crown that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal that glowed with internal fire. Every being in the chamber bowed as one, and Jake bowed with them, counting in his head to make sure he held it for exactly the right amount of time before straightening. The queen moved forward with grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Her footsteps making no sound at all on the polished floor. She reached the raised platform at the front of the chamber and turned to face them all, her four eyes sweeping across the crowd in a way that made Jake feel like she had looked at each being individually. "Welcome, delegates of the galactic community." Her voice was like music and thunder combined, filling the enormous space without need for amplification. "We gather today to discuss the new trade agreements between the Crithian Empire and the member worlds." She began to speak about shipping routes and tariff schedules and resource allocation. Her words precise and commanding. Jake tried to focus, but he was distracted by how amazing she looked. He had seen pictures and videos, but they had not prepared him for the reality of her presence. He had dreamed of meeting her since he first learned about the Crithian Empire in his Xenocultural Studies classes. Back at the academy, his datapad was recording everything, of course. But he wanted to take notes the old-fashioned way too, so he could review them later. He pulled the pad from his belt, carefully and quietly, trying not to make any sound. His hands were still sweaty though, and the pad was heavier than he expected. It slipped from his fingers. The crash of the datapad hitting the polished floor echoed through the silent chamber like a gunshot, bouncing twice before sliding to a stop several feet away from us. Every eye and visual organ in the room turned to stare at Jake. The Queen stopped speaking mid-sentence. Jake's face burned with embarrassment, and without thinking, without remembering any protocol, without considering consequences, he blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. Oops. The single word seemed to hang in the air like a physical thing. Claire's face went completely white. Commander Torres closed his eyes like he was preparing for an execution. The other delegates looked at Jake with expressions ranging from horror to disgust to what might have been pity. No one interrupted the Queen. No one spoke when she was speaking. No one made any sound at all during formal audiences. These were the most basic rules of Crithian protocol, and Jake had just broken all of them at once. Queen Velthara's four eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to melt into the floor. The silence stretched on and on until Jake thought he might pass out from the pressure of it. Then the Queen spoke, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Approach me, human." It was not a request. Jake's legs felt like water, but he forced them to move, walking forward while every being in the chamber watched him. He could feel their stares like weights on his back. Claire reached out like she wanted to stop him, but Ben caught her arm and shook his head slightly. There was nothing anyone could do now. Jake walked the seemingly endless distance to the platform where the Queen stood, his footsteps the only sound in the massive hall. He stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at her, at the most powerful being in the known universe, and waited for his life to end. Jake stood at the base of the platform, looking up at Queen Velthara, and tried to remember how to breathe. His entire body felt frozen except for his racing heart. The Queen's four eyes studied him with an expression he could not read, and the silence in the chamber was so complete that Jake could hear his own pulse throbbing in his ears. Behind him he could sense Claire trying to step forward, but Commander Torres must have stopped her because he heard a quiet scuffle. And then nothing. "What is your name, human?" the Queen asked, her voice somehow both gentle and commanding at the same time. "Jake Morrison?" "Your Majesty," he managed to say without his voice cracking too badly, remembering at least that much protocol. "And why did you interrupt my address, Jake Morrison?" There was no anger in her tone, but Jake knew that meant nothing. Powerful beings did not need to shout to destroy someone. He could lie, make up some excuse about an accident or a medical condition. But something about those four eyes made him think she would know immediately if he was not being honest. "I was excited to see you in person." "Your Majesty," Jake said quietly, his face still burning with shame. "I have studied the Crithian Empire since I was young, and I have Wanted to meet you for years, and I was trying to take notes on my datapad, but my hands were sweating. Because I was nervous and excited, and I dropped it like an idiot. Several beings in the chamber made sounds of shock at his casual admission. No one called themselves an idiot. In front of the Queen, no one admitted to being nervous. Diplomats were supposed to be smooth and controlled and professional. The Queen tilted her head slightly, a gesture that Jake's cultural training told him indicated curiosity in Krithian body language. "You were excited to see me?" she asked. "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake said. "Because there was no point in lying now. You have ruled longer than any other current leader in the galaxy, and your strategic victories are studied in every military academy, and you created the first peaceful expansion in Krithian history, and I think that is amazing." The Queen stared at him for a long moment, and Jake was certain he was about to be thrown out of the chamber, or worse than she did something that no one in the room had ever seen her do before. She laughed. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh, but a genuine sound of amusement that rang through the hall like bells. Every being in the chamber seemed to freeze in shock, and Jake just stood there with no idea what to do. 600 years, the Queen said when her laughter faded. 600 years of audiences and meetings and negotiations, and not one being has ever been honest about being excited to see me. They bow and scrape and calculate every word, but you drop your datapad and say, "Oops." She stepped down from the platform, and suddenly she was right in front of Jake. So close he could see the complex patterns in her scales and smell. "Something like cinnamon and ozone. I find your honesty refreshing." "Jake Morrison," she said quietly enough that only he could hear. "Would you join me in my private chambers for conversation?" Jake's mind went completely blank. A private audience with the Queen was almost unheard of, and certainly never offered to a junior diplomat from a species as new and unimportant as humanity. "I would be honored, Your Majesty," he heard himself say. The Queen turned back to the assembled delegates and raised one of her 4 hands. "This session is concluded," she announced. "My advisors will handle the remaining details of the trade agreements. I have other matters to attend to." She looked directly at High Chancellor Zorth, an ancient Krithian who served as her closest advisor. "See that the human delegation is given appropriate quarters, and send word that Jake Morrison is under my personal protection while he is aboard this station." The High Chancellor bowed deeply, but Jake could see something like concern or maybe disapproval in his eyes. The Queen gestured for Jake to follow and walked toward a side door that he had not noticed before. He hurried after her, very aware of every eye in the chamber following his movement. As they left the hall, he heard Claire's voice rise in protest, and Commander Torres trying to calm her down. The door closed behind them, and suddenly Jake was alone with the most powerful being in the universe in a corridor that seemed to be carved from crystal. "Your people will worry about you," the Queen said as she led him down the hallway. "But my protection is absolute, and you will come to no harm in my presence." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Jake said, still trying to process what was happening. "Tell me, Jake Morrison, are you always this honest, or was it simply because you were too nervous to think of a proper lie?" The question caught him off guard, and he almost gave a diplomatic answer before he remembered that honesty had saved him before. "Both, I think," he admitted. "I am not very good at lying, and I was definitely too nervous to try." The Queen made a sound that might have been another laugh. "Most beings who walk these halls are excellent liars," she said. "It is one of the most tiresome things about ruling an empire." They reached an enormous door decorated with symbols that Jake recognized as ancient Krithian script, but could not read. The door opened at the Queen's approach, and they entered a chamber that was nothing like what Jake had expected. He had imagined a throne room or a formal receiving area, but instead he found a space that looked almost comfortable. There were surfaces that might have been furniture arranged around the room, and one entire wall was transparent, showing the stars beyond the station. There were objects that looked like they might be decorations or maybe souvenirs from different worlds, and something that might have been art on another wall. "You look surprised," the Queen observed as she moved to a cabinet and began preparing something. "I expected something more formal." "Your Majesty," Jake admitted, "this is my private sanctuary," she said. "The one place in the entire empire where I do not have to perform for anyone." She turned back to him holding 2 containers of some kind of liquid. "I hope your biology can process Crithian tea," she said. "It will not harm you, but it may taste strange." Jake accepted the container carefully, surprised by how warm it felt. "You invited me here just to talk?" he asked, then immediately wished he had not because it sounded rude. "I invited you here because you are the first being in longer than I can remember who has treated me like a person rather than a position," the Queen said quietly, settling onto one of the furniture pieces in a way that suggested she was sitting. Jake did not know what to say to that, so he tried the tea. It tasted like mint and fire and something sweet all at once. "For 600 years I have ruled this empire," the Queen continued. "I have made decisions that affected trillions of lives, and I have been praised and feared and respected. But no one has been honest with me in centuries. They tell me what they think I want to hear or what will benefit them, but never what they actually think." She looked at Jake with those 4 eyes, and he saw something in them that he had not expected. She looked tired. "So yes, Jake Morrison, I invited you here just to talk with someone who might actually say what they mean." Jake sat down on another piece of furniture, carefully, still holding his tea. "What would you like to talk about, Your Majesty?" "Tell me about Earth," she said. "Tell me about your oceans that I have heard cover most of your planet." So Jake told her about the oceans and the beaches and the sound of waves crashing against cliffs, and somehow they talked for hours while the galaxy turned beyond the transparent wall. Jake woke up in quarters that were far nicer than anything he had expected, with a view of the station's main hub through a floor-to-ceiling window and furniture that had somehow adjusted itself to human proportions overnight. He had talked with Queen Velthara until the station's artificial night cycle began, and she had finally sent him back to his rooms with an invitation to return the next day. Claire had been waiting for him in the corridor outside with Commander Torres, and she had pulled him into a hug so tight he thought his ribs might crack. "Do you have any idea how terrified I was?" she had demanded. "The Queen has executed people for less than what you did in that chamber." She laughed, Jake had said, still somewhat amazed by the whole experience. "That might be worse," Torres had muttered. But there had been relief in his eyes too now. Jake was getting ready to return to the Queen's quarters when his door chime sounded. He opened it to find a woman he did not recognize, wearing the uniform of Human Intelligence Services. "Jake Morrison?" she asked, though she clearly already knew who he was. "Yes? I am Diana Cole, intelligence officer attached to the diplomatic mission," she said, stepping into his room without waiting for invitation. "We need to talk about your situation with the Queen." Jake closed the door and tried not to feel annoyed at the intrusion. "What situation?" "You have been granted access that diplomats spend decades trying to achieve," Diana said bluntly. "The Queen has placed you under her personal protection and invited you to private audiences. Do you understand how unprecedented this is?" "I dropped my datapad and said oops," Jake said. "I did not plan any of this." "I know," Diana said, her expression softening slightly. "But whether you planned it or not, you are now in a position of incredible importance and potentially incredible danger." She pulled out a small device and activated it. Jake recognized a privacy shield when he saw one. "What I am about to tell you is classified," Diana continued. We have been monitoring communications between several alien delegations, and there is growing concern about your relationship with the Queen. We have talked twice. Jake protested. Twice is more than most species get in a decade, Diana countered. Ambassador Krell of the Vaxxan Confederacy has been trying to arrange a private meeting with the Queen for 15 years. You got one in 15 minutes. Jake sat down heavily on his bed. What are they saying? That humanity is manipulating the Queen somehow, Diana said. That we have some kind of secret technology or method for influencing her. It is nonsense, of course, but dangerous nonsense, because it makes us look like a threat. I did not manipulate anyone. Jake said firmly, I know that, and our government knows that, but perception matters in galactic politics, Diana told him. There are factions that will use this situation to undermine human interests, or worse. She leaned forward and her voice became urgent. If the Queen trusts you, if she really is opening up to you, then you need to be very careful. She's the most powerful being in the galaxy, and that means she is also the loneliest and the most vulnerable to betrayal. Jake thought about the tired look in the Queen's eyes when she talked about 600 years of calculated political games. She just wants someone to be honest with her, he said quietly. Then be honest. Diana said, but watch your back, because there are beings on this station who would kill you just to disrupt whatever is developing between humanity and the Crithian Empire. She deactivated the privacy shield and stood to leave. Commander Torres will increase your security detail, but try not to let it show, she said at the door. And Jake? If the Queen tells you anything important, anything at all about threats or concerns, you report it immediately. After she left, Jake sat for a long time thinking about what it meant to be friends with someone who ruled 40% of the galaxy. His door chimed again, and this time it was Claire. Ready to go? She asked, and Jake noticed she looked like she had not slept much. Diana just warned me about political conspiracies. Jake said. Claire nodded like she had expected this. There is always conspiracy at this level of politics, she said. The question is whether you are going to let it stop you from doing what the Queen clearly needs, which is being her friend, Claire said simply. I have watched the recordings of yesterday's session a dozen times, and I have read every piece of cultural analysis we have on Crithian behavior. She was not performing for the crowd when she laughed. Jake, that was genuine surprise and genuine pleasure. So what do? You go have tea with the most powerful being in the universe, and you keep being yourself, Claire said with a small smile. And try not to say oops again. The guards outside the Queen's quarters recognized Jake this time and opened the doors without question. Inside he found Queen Velthara sitting by the transparent wall looking out at the stars. Good morning, Jake Morrison, she said without turning around. Good morning, Your Majesty, he replied, moving to sit where he had the day before. I have been thinking about our conversation, the Queen said, about how you describe feeling like you do not belong in diplomatic circles, like you are pretending to be something you are not. Imposter syndrome, Jake supplied. It is common among humans who get promoted beyond what they think they deserve. I feel the same way sometimes, the Queen said, and Jake tried not to look shocked. I have ruled for 600 years, and there are still days when I wonder if I am truly capable of handling the responsibility. She finally turned to look at him. Do you know why I have never been defeated in war, Jake Morrison? Because you are a brilliant strategist? Because I am terrified of losing, she said quietly. Every battle I fight, every campaign I plan, I do so with the knowledge that billions of lives depend on my decisions, and the fear of making the wrong choice drives me to prepare for every possibility. Jake thought about that for a moment. Is that why you work so hard to maintain the perfect image? So no one knows you are afraid? Fear is weakness in Crithian culture, the Queen said. A leader who shows fear is a leader who will be challenged. I cannot afford to be challenged when the Empire needs stability. But you are showing fear to me. Jake pointed out the Queen was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she finally said. Perhaps that is why I find your company so valuable. You do not see me as the Queen who must be perfect, but as Velthara who is simply trying her best. Is Velthara okay if I ask her something that might be inappropriate? The Queen made the head tilt that indicated curiosity. Proceed. Why did you really call off the session yesterday? Jake asked. It was not just because I was honest, was it? The Queen stood and walked to the transparent wall. All four of her hands clasped behind her back. No, she admitted. I called it off because I am facing a crisis that I cannot share with my advisors, and I do not know what to do. When you interrupted with your honest mistake, I saw an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To talk with someone who has no political agenda, no stake in Crithian power structures. No reason to lie to me about what they think. She turned back to face him. I'm going to tell you something that could get you killed if the wrong beings find out you know it, she said seriously. But I need someone I can trust, and somehow I trust you. Jake Morrison who says oops. Jake swallowed hard but nodded. There is an enemy coming, the Queen said. Her voice heavy with the weight of the words. An ancient enemy that my people thought we had destroyed millennia ago, but we were wrong. They are waking up at the edge of the galaxy, and when they arrive in full force, I am not certain even the Crithian Empire can stop them. Jake stared at Queen Velthara as the weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. An ancient enemy? He managed to ask the Queen move to a console built into the wall and activated a display that showed a star map of the galaxy. She gestured, and a section at the far edge turned red. The Devourers, she said. And even speaking the name seemed to cost her something. They nearly destroyed the galaxy 12,000 years ago before a coalition of species managed to drive them into hibernation and the void between galaxies. But you said they were destroyed. We told ourselves they were destroyed because the truth was too frightening, the Queen admitted. We convinced ourselves that the danger was over, and we let the old alliances fall apart, and we forgot how to work together. She manipulated the display, and images appeared showing ships unlike anything Jake had ever seen, organic and mechanical at the same time, covered in what looked like teeth and claws. My deep space scouts detected the first signs of their awakening 6 months ago. Velthara continued. They are still far away, but they are coming, and they are hungry. Why have you not told the other species? Jake asked. Surely, if everyone knows the threat, they will unite to face it. The Queen laughed, but there was no humor in it. You are young and idealistic. Jake Morrison, she said. The species that make up the galactic community are too busy fighting among themselves to unite against anything. They would argue about who should lead, who should contribute resources, who would benefit most from the eventual victory. She turned off the display and faced him directly. By the time they finished arguing, the Devourers would be eating their home worlds. Jake thought about the delegates he had seen in the chamber, how they had all stood in rigid formation according to rank and importance. So what are you going to do? I have been preparing the Crithian military in secret, Velthara said. Building ships, training soldiers, developing new weapons, but it will not be enough. The Devourers do not fight like normal enemies. They consume and adapt and grow stronger with every world they take. She sat down heavily, and for the first time since he met her, Jake saw the Queen look truly defeated. I am the most powerful being in the galaxy, and I cannot protect my people from what is coming. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about what Diana had said about perception and politics. What if your oops moment was not an accident? He said slowly, What do you mean? You said the species cannot unite because they are too busy with politics and positioning. Jake explained, his mind racing. But what if there was a species that did not care about any of that? A species that was too new and too unimportant to threaten anyone? The Queen's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Humanity. We are outsiders, Jake said, gaining confidence as the idea took shape. We have no ancient grievances with anyone. No territorial disputes, no history of conquest. If we called for unity, people might actually listen because we have nothing to gain from it. Or they might ignore you because you have no power to back up your words. But you do, Jake pointed out. If humanity calls for unity and the Crithian Empire supports us, that changes everything. Velthara stood and began pacing. Her forearms moving in patterns that Jake had learned meant she was thinking hard. It could work, she said finally. But it would put humanity at tremendous risk. There are factions that would try to silence you or discredit you, or worse. There are already factions trying to do that, Jake said, thinking of Diana's warning. Ambassador Krell is spreading rumors about us manipulating you. The Queen stopped pacing and looked at him sharply. Krell is spreading rumors? According to our intelligence, yes. Something dangerous flashed in Velthara. I will deal with Ambassador Krell, she said in a tone that made Jake very glad he was not Ambassador Krell. But first we need to confirm what we are facing. She activated her communication system. This is Queen Velthara. I need Lisa Grant from the human delegation brought to my quarters immediately along with her research team's latest findings. Jake blinked in surprise. Lisa Grant? She is one of our scientists studying dark matter fluctuations. And those fluctuations are how we first detected the Devourers, Velthara said. I need to see if her independent research supports what my scouts have found. 20 minutes later, Lisa Grant arrived looking both excited and terrified, carrying data storage devices and tripping over her own feet in her hurry. Your Majesty, she stammered, bowing so low she nearly fell over. Dr. Grant, the Queen said with more gentleness than Jake had heard her use before. Please show me what you have discovered in your dark matter research. Lisa set up her equipment with shaking hands and pulled up readings that meant nothing to Jake but made Velthara go very still. These energy signatures, the Queen said quietly. When did you first detect them? 3 months ago, Lisa said. We thought they were just unusual background radiation at first, but the pattern has been growing stronger and more focused. Show me the directional analysis. Lisa pulled up another display, and Jake saw that the energy signatures were coming from the same region of space that the Queen had marked on her map. This is not background radiation. Dr. Grant, Velthara said. This is a species that feeds on dark matter waking up after 12,000 years of sleep. Lisa went pale. The Devourers? But those are just legends. Legends based on terrible truth, the Queen said. And they are coming. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the room and Velthara's communication system activated automatically. Your Majesty, a voice said urgently. We have multiple ships moving toward your quarters at high speed. Security is moving to intercept. The Queen was already moving, pulling Jake and Lisa behind her as the door to her chambers exploded inward. Armed figures in unmarked armor poured through the opening, and Commander Torres appeared from somewhere with the human security team. Weapons firing. Get the Queen out, Torres shouted, laying down covering fire, but the attackers were not trying to reach the Queen. Jake realized with sick horror they were trying to reach him. One of them broke through the defensive line and raised a weapon aimed directly at Jake's head. Queen Velthara moved faster than anything that large should be able to move, putting herself between Jake and the attacker. Her roar shook the room, and the attacker actually stumbled backward. More of the Queen's personal guard arrived, and the fight turned quickly. The attackers were captured or killed, and suddenly it was over. Torres was injured but alive, and Lisa was hiding behind an overturned piece of furniture, but Jake could not take his eyes off the Queen. She had protected him. The most powerful being in the galaxy had put herself in danger to protect a junior human diplomat who said, "Oops, thank you," he whispered. You are under my protection, Balthara said firmly, and I do not break my word. She turned to her guards. Find out who sent these assassins and bring them to me alive if possible. I want answers. Then she activated her communication system with a command that echoed through the entire station. This is Queen Balthara. I am calling an emergency summit of all galactic powers. Attendance is mandatory, and the subject is the survival of every species in this galaxy. She looked at Jake with determination burning in her 4 eyes. We're done with politics and games, she said. It is time for the truth. The emergency summit chamber was even larger than the one where Jake had first seen Queen Balthara, and now it was filled with the leaders of every major species in the galaxy. All of them looking confused and angry about being summoned on such short notice. Jake stood near the front with Claire and Commander Taurus. His arm bandaged from a minor injury during the attack, but otherwise unharmed. The attackers had been traced back to a conspiracy involving Ambassador Krell and several other species who saw humanity's growing relationship with the Krithian Empire as a threat to their own power. Krell was currently in custody and facing charges that would likely end his political career. Queen Balthara stood on the central platform, looking at the assembled leaders with an expression that made even the most powerful among them shift uncomfortably. I have called you here because I am done pretending, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. For 600 years, I have played the games of politics, carefully managing alliances and appearances, never showing weakness or fear. But that ends today. She activated a display that showed the same images she had shown Jake. The Devourers and their terrible ships and the energy signatures that marked their approach. 12,000 years ago, our ancestors fought an enemy that nearly destroyed all life in this galaxy. Balthara continued. They won at terrible cost, and they told us the Devourers were destroyed, but they were not. They were only sleeping, and now they are waking up. The chamber erupted in noise. Leaders shouting questions and denials and demands for proof. The Queen let them shout for a moment before raising one hand for silence. I have proof, she said. My scouts have confirmed it, and independent research by human scientists supports it. The Devourers are coming, and they will arrive at the outer colonies within 6 months. Why should we believe you? One of the delegates shouted. This could be a trick to increase Krithian power. Because I am asking for help, Balthara said simply. And the chamber went silent. Krithian Queen asking for help was unheard of. The Krithian Empire is the most powerful single force in the galaxy, but we cannot defeat the Devourers alone. She continued, no single species can. This is a threat that requires all of us to work together, or all of us will fall separately. And why should we trust you to lead this alliance? Another delegate demanded, why should we give the Krithian Empire that much power? I am not asking to lead, Balthara said. And Jake saw High Chancellor Zorith's eyes widen in shock. I am proposing that the alliance be led by the newest member of our galactic community, a species with no territorial ambitions and no history of conquest. She turned and looked directly at Jake. I am proposing that humanity coordinate the defense of the galaxy. The chamber exploded in protest, and Claire grabbed Jake's arm so hard he thought she might break it. Are you insane? Someone shouted. Humans have barely left their own star system. Exactly, the Queen said calmly. They have nothing to gain from lying to you and everything to lose if they fail. They are outsiders with no stake in our ancient rivalries, and that makes them the only species everyone might actually trust. Jake felt like he was falling, even though he was standing still. Your Majesty, he said, his voice somehow carrying despite the noise. I am just a junior diplomat who dropped his data pad. The Queen smiled at him with genuine warmth. You are the being who was brave enough to be honest, when everyone else was calculating their political advantage. She said, "You are the one who saw past power to the person underneath it, and you are the one who had the idea that might actually save us all." She looked back at the assembled leaders. "Jake Morrison will speak for the Alliance, and I will support him with every resource the Crithian Empire possesses. Any species that wishes to survive the coming storm will do the same. This is madness," High Chancellor Zora said, speaking for the first time. "We cannot put the fate of the Empire in the hands of a human. We are putting the fate of the Empire in the hands of someone I trust," Valthara said firmly. "And I trust Jake Morrison more than I have trusted anyone in 600 years." She gestured for Jake to join her on the platform. Claire pushed him forward gently, and he climbed the steps on shaking legs. "Tell them," the Queen said quietly. "Tell them what you told me about humanity being outsiders." Jake looked out at hundreds of alien faces, some curious, some hostile, some just confused. He thought about all the protocol training Claire had given him and all the rules he was supposed to follow. Then he thought about dropping his datapad and saying oops, and how that had led to this impossible moment. "I am not a great speaker," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "And I am definitely not qualified for what the Queen is proposing, but she is right about one thing. Humanity has no agenda here except survival." He activated the display to show Earth, small and blue and beautiful. "This is our home," he said. "One planet in a galaxy full of ancient empires and powerful species. We are new, and we are weak, and we are scared of what is coming, but we are also used to being the underdogs." He changed the image to show human history. The wars and the disasters and the times humanity had faced extinction and survived. We know what it is like to face impossible odds. Jake continued, "And we know that the only way to survive is to work together, to put aside our differences long enough to face the real threat." He looked at the Queen, and she nodded encouragement. "I cannot promise that I will make perfect decisions," Jake said honestly. "I cannot promise that I will never make mistakes, but I can promise that I will listen to all of you, that I will consider every perspective, and that I will do everything in my power to give us all a chance to survive." He paused, and then added with a small smile, "And if I mess up, I will probably say oops again." A few beings in the crowd made sounds that might have been laughter. "The Devourers are coming whether we unite or not," Jake said, becoming serious again. "The only question is whether we face them as a galaxy or as individual species waiting to die. I vote for standing together." The Queen stepped forward beside him. "As do I," she said. "And I am willing to place Crithian ships and soldiers under Jake Morrison's coordination for the duration of this crisis." For a long moment nothing happened, then one of the delegates stood. A leader from a species Jake recognized as the Turellian Collective. "The Turellian Collective will join this alliance," she said. Another delegate stood. Then another, and suddenly leaders across the chamber were pledging their support. Not all of them, Jake noticed. Some walked out in protest, and some just sat in stubborn silence, but enough agreed that it might actually work. High Chancellor Zorath approached the platform and bowed to the Queen. "I still think this is madness," he said, "but I will support your decision." "Your Majesty." He turned to Jake and studied him with ancient eyes. "Do not make me regret this." "Human, I will try not to," Jake said. And Zorath's expression might have been a smile. The next hours passed in a blur of meetings and planning sessions. Claire took over as the primary human ambassador to the Crithian Empire, while Jake was given command authority for the Allied defense. Fleet Commander Torres was promoted to head of joint security for the entire alliance, and Lisa Grant became Chief Scientific Advisor. The Outer Colonies reported the first Devourer attacks right on schedule, and the Allied fleet responded with coordinated strikes that actually pushed them Back it was not a victory, not yet. But it was a start 6 months after Jake dropped his datapad. He stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship, watching the combined fleet of a dozen species. Moving in perfect formation, Queen Velthara stood beside him, her 4 eyes watching the tactical displays. "Do you ever regret saying oops that day?" she asked quietly. Jake thought about everything that had happened. The fear and the danger and the weight of responsibility that sometimes kept him awake at night. "Not even a little bit," he said honestly. The Queen laughed. That same genuine sound that had shocked the council chamber. "Good," she said, "because I am very glad you did." An alert sounded and Tactical reported another Devour fleet entering the system. "All ships prepare for engagement," Jake ordered. His voice calm and clear. The Alliance responded as one. Human and Crithian and Tyrellian and all the others, working together like they had never worked before. "Here they come," Torres said from his station. Jake took a deep breath and thought about Earth and about all the worlds depending on him to make the right choices. Then let us show them what happens when the galaxy actually works. "Together," he said. The Queen placed one of her hands on his shoulder in a gesture of support and friendship. "For the galaxy," she said. "For the galaxy?" Jake agreed, and gave the order to engage. The battle was fierce, and the war was far from over, but for the first time since the crisis began, Jake felt something like hope. Maybe saying oops had been the best mistake he ever made.